I'm Elizabeth Cipolla, and I'm the practice manager here at Decision Associates, a management consulting firm based out of Erie, Pennsylvania, serving clients all throughout the United States. Today, I'm excited to talk to you about a concept that has been one of great stress to many leaders, and that is the concept of leading and understanding change. Many times when leaders are trying to implement change, it can be very frustrating because all of the best laid plans and intentions end up creating a firestorm of chaos, regret at times, and oftentimes dysfunction. And what does this boil down to? Disappointment. So today, what I'm looking forward to talking to you about is really understanding, first and foremost, why change matters, and then secondarily, walking you through something that really is what I like to call a grieving process, a process that everybody experiencing change has to experience in order to get to the really lovely side of change. So there is a ooey gooey, sticky, yucky, messy part of change that is unavoidable. And, it's really important to understand the psychology behind what's happening so that you can prepare yourself to implement change in a more successful and simplistic way than perhaps you've been able to do thus far. So first of all, I think it's important to understand and remind ourselves that whenever there is change, there also must be a loss. And when there is a loss, there's a grieving process. So when you think about it, it only makes sense that it's important to understand the grieving process that everybody experiences whenever something changes from how it had been or always has been into something different. And it's important to understand how it impacts each of the four stages of change, which many leaders, if not most, really don't necessarily understand, or if they understand it, take the time to remind themselves of when they're planning for change. So really, the focus and the mindset that I challenge everyone listening to this to really shift towards is really, first and foremost, understanding and caring deeply about how the people impacted by the change you're planning for, understanding how it's going to impact them and really caring about that. And once you do that, you're in a great spot to position yourself to support them during the evolutionary process of change. So I like to explain change in this way. Change has four different steps. And the first step of change is shock. The second step is anger. The third is acceptance. And the fourth is commitment. Now, it's funny because oftentimes when we're announcing a change as a leader, we think, okay, we're going to announce it, we're going to tell everyone how it's going to be, and we're going to give them the resources to know how to do things differently, and then they'll be committed to it. And then we're shocked, surprised, and quite frankly, disappointed and discouraged when they don't commit to it. Well, that's because think of it as a change sandwich. On one side is the shock, the other side is the commitment, but in between, the peanut butter and the jelly of it is the anger and the acceptance. So let's talk about shock a little bit. Shock is that initial reaction when it's announced that something is going to change. So just human beings, the basic psychology of human beings is when we hear something is going to change, we're either shocked or we're in denial, and we're not really happy to accept the fact that change is happening. And when that happens, what happens to our productivity? Well, and by the way, our self-confidence, right? Because when we hear something's changing, the reason why our productivity and our performance might not be so great is because we're not feeling so confident, because we're about to venture into the unknown. So our performance begins to dip. And then after that first step, the next stage is anger. So once that reality sinks in and people are starting to accept that change is happening, this is when they might start to react negatively. And why is that? Because they might feel angry. And at the root of any feeling of anger is fear. And what's the fear based upon? It's based upon the unknown. So at this stage of anger, they might actively resist and actually protest against the changes. One thing I want to point out is that when, not if, but when your employees or when your stakeholders are experiencing this stage of anger and they're resisting the change, if at this point in time you decide to pull the rug out from under it and say, oh, it's not going to work, so never mind, the change is never going to work. So it's important to understand the psychology. This is a natural part of the process. And at this stage of anger, it's important to figure out what you can do and plan ahead of time, anticipating they're going to go through this stage of anger, so that you can help them move out of this very stressful stage of change and start shepherding them into a more positive acceptance stage, which is stage 3, acceptance. And during this stage, this is when people begin to stop focusing on what they've lost and they start to let go and accept the change. But this will only happen if during stage 2 of anger, you were working closely with them to help them move into that more positive acceptance stage. So at this point in time, they're going to start to test and explore what the changes mean to them. I mean, that's human nature. But once again, it's very, very important during stage 3 that you ensure feedback both ways throughout this process of the change. And then what happens? We move finally to stage 4, commitment. And once we reach stage 4, not only have they accepted the changes, but now they begin to embrace them. And they actually start to restructure their ways of working and become more productive and positive. And why is this happening? Well, I'll tell you why. Number one, it's because leaders like you who are listening to this are preparing yourself in advance by understanding the grieving process they're going through. You're preparing yourself by understanding the fact that inevitably performance and self-confidence is going to decrease for a period of time, most specifically during that peanut butter and jelly, anger and acceptance, those 2 stages of the change curve. And you understand that it's important for you to show up consistently and provide them the support and allow for 2-way communication to help shepherd them from shock, which is the initial stage, through anger, through acceptance, and into commitment. Hopefully you've enjoyed the time that you've spent listening to this today. And if you have any questions, feel free to check us out at www.decisionassociates.net.